Things that our school district or our county office does is we do at some point approve charters, or if a school district doesn't approve a charter, they can appeal to our county board of education, and then we can either approve or not approve the charter. So one of the charters we did approve on appeal from Vicel Unified is Sycamore Valley and Blue Oak Academies, and as a result of that, we then, once we accept them, we have to oversee their charter, and I've been appointed to their school board as a representative from the county office. It happens tonight at 6:30 is the meeting. I was going to kind of be really late, but then our board president resigned a few days ago, and so I need to be there at a reasonable time to ensure we have a quorum and they take care of business and some of the things around replacing the board members. So I apologize. That all happened just Monday. So it was a kind of a shock.
Nobody can ever replace dumb luck.
Yeah, I know, after all the back and forth. Well, you know, the County Office of Education is kind of a unique entity. Some people call us a bureaucracy, and in some ways we actually are. In my past, I was superintendent of Vicel Unified until about a year and a half ago. And I had this opportunity. Superintendent Vidak of the county office had talked to me for many, many months. We used to meet once a month to kind of talk over things, just to keep in contact. Since Vicel Unified is the largest school district in the county, I wanted to keep on good terms with the county superintendent. So along that way, he became a pretty good mentor and really convinced me to come over to work for him, which, being superintendent of Vicel Unified was one of those 70-hour-a-week jobs, day and night, weekends, cell phone buzzing all the time. And so when he offered this opportunity, I kind of took a long time for me to decide, but I didn't shock everyone because no one would think, there was no reason for me to leave to another job. But, the reason I did that is I really respect Jim Vidak, and he's been in education. We were just trying to figure out, I think 55 years, because fourth grade teacher, right? Was it you or your brother?
My younger brother.
Fourth grade teacher, and I know he opened Crestwood School 50 years ago as principal. So I added together, 22, 23 years old to 55, maybe 56 years. So he's, I never asked him, but he must be 70, 76, 78 years old, somewhere in there. He's up for election. I think he's going to run again in this next time. But at some point, he's not going to run. And I told him very much that when he decides not to run, I want to be there. I'm one of his deputies. I'm very interested in continuing in education. So that, I tell people that. I'm not pushing him out. He's not ready to go yet, but if he ever decides to leave. So what does the county office do? Some people think we're in charge of school districts, but that's really not true. We do have some things we have to monitor and some things we have to approve. But all school districts are actually their own sovereign district, and they're controlled by a school board. So they make the local decisions. They're responsible for what they do. The county office is really, and I called it a bureaucracy, sometimes I think it is, we are that oversight in between the California Department of Ed and a school district for many things. We legally, back in the 90s, there were some Richmond and some school districts kind of went bankrupt, and they passed a law and said that county offices have to review and approve school district budgets on a regular basis. So there's 3 times a year when the budget is approved in the fiscal year in June, and then twice, a first interim and a second interim in the fall and in the spring. School districts have to submit their budget to us, and we have to review it for accuracy, as far as we can tell, accounting accuracy, fiscal solvency for 3 years. So they make projections that they can not go bankrupt for 3 years based on what we think revenues will be. And if we see that they're not solvent, we can actually we can not approve their budget, we can qualify their budget, which means they're in a little bit of trouble and we need to set up a plan, or we approve it. Since that time, there have been very few school districts that have gone under because that became kind of an extra, even though you have an elected school board, it gave an outside entity beyond just their own auditor that they purchase to review books. It gave someone else with some parameters on, are you going to go bankrupt or not? So that's one of our main responsibilities, and that's actually one of my jobs. I oversee, in my new job, or this job, I oversee facilities, budgets, legal contracts, and we do actually, we handle the money for many of the districts in the county. Because a school district that has, we have 43 school districts in Tulare County, 43. And they range from size in student population from 19 students. California Hot Springs has its own school with only 19 students. They have one teacher, principal, and 2 aides. Teacher, principal together, or teacher, principal, superintendent, and 2 aides and 19 kids, K-12 or K-8. And so K-8, so it's an interesting school. So that's one school on one extreme, and then you have Visalia Unified with 28,000 students and 41 schools. So in between you have, probably, we have, I think, 22 schools that are less than 1,500 students. So when you get down to 1,000 or 800, 600, you can't do everything yourself. So we do process almost all paychecks, thousands of paychecks for all teachers and employees come through our office. Even Visalia Unified, they pulled away a little bit, but they still run some of their things through us, and they have to be approved. So we process purchase orders, we review contracts, and part of that is that whole extra set of accounting eyes to ensure legal expenditures. We have some responsibility to look for anomalies. Now, we're not down in the weeds, but you can, we do pick up things and we go back and we go, are you sure? Is this in your budget and how are you spending the money? So we do have that back and forth. Very collegial to make sure that we're working together, and what I tell everyone is we want to keep everyone out of jail. I mean, the best way to get in trouble is to mess up with money and have someone, or to be fraudulent yourself, or to look like you are, either one, or to do something that you think is okay and it's not. So that's one of our big roles, and that's really in my area. We also provide lots of services that little school districts can't have because there are a lot of laws. The ed code is like way too thick. In fact, if you guys couldn't do anything, if you would have them burn the ed code and start over, it would make school a lot better. I mean, there's so many laws that it's hard to even keep up. We're always finding out we're not doing something according to some new law. But things like, and a lot of laws are good, don't get me wrong. One of them I'm going to talk about is that, we have to provide health screenings and some health services to students. There's some requirements, some basic, they're not really a lot. But little school districts, if you have 300 students, they can't hire a nurse. They can't afford it, and to get a temporary nurse. So what we do is we hire a group of nurses and we kind of sell them to the school districts. That way we contract them out. We don't sell them, but we're able to hire a whole nurse, and 3 school districts or 4 can share them. The small school districts, so they go out for 1 day a week or half a day a week, or they go out and do the screening. So we do that kind of a service, and we do a lot of other kinds of services like that. Help them with textbooks, adoptions, and making sure their teachers get trained. All of that is voluntary, though. School districts don't have to have us do that. It's up to them. So the thing that's not voluntary is reviewing the budget. The other thing that we do is if there's any disagreement about school district boundaries. If you think school districts, they're like countries, or states. So we're more like the first level of the federal court if the states argue with each other. So if one school district says, no, we the parents that, want to be in our school district, not in Tulare School District, and we want to take those parents, we have a county committee that reviews school district boundaries, and we're kind of, not the final word, they can appeal to the State Board of Education, but most disputes, well, not disputes, most boundary changes, because every now and then there are boundary changes because citizens can decide they want to move from one school district to another, a subdivision or something. If it makes sense, they can propose that, and it goes through this committee. Because usually if two school districts and their school boards okay and they both agree, it's easy. Then they come to our committee, we review it. As long as everyone agrees on the change, then it's simple. But usually what happens is not everyone agrees, and citizens might want to be in one and they're really in another. And so that doesn't happen very often in our county, but some of the places, LA and the Bay Area, you find out all kinds of strange things where people, for whatever reason, are wanting to be in one district or another. So we are in charge of making sure boundaries are there, and also board member elections, making sure that board members are elected. We work with the elections office, kind of in between the school districts and the elections office, to make sure who's on the board, is their term up, did they file the right notices and file to run, and are they living in the right area? So we keep all the official records of board members for all the school districts in our office, not just in the school. We're like the verifier of that record. So, that's that cumbersome thing. And all that really goes under Superintendent Vidak, and we just work for him. So I work for him. It's really when it says that it says the superintendent of schools will do this, that usually means that one of us will do it. You know how it is. But Mr. Vidak is actually an elected official. So he is elected county-wide election every 4 years. And the rest of us, like me, I'm hired by him. So that's kind of the structure. A lot of parents will call us up and say, I am so mad at my school, and I went to their district office and they're doing things wrong, and I want you to tell them to do it right. And I go, well, did you go to the school board? Well, I tried to. I don't, I want to talk to the superintendent of the county. I go, well, you should talk to the superintendent of the district and the school board first. Which reminds me, one other thing we do is that whenever there's a dispute over parents where their kids attend school, like if you live in Visalia and you want to go to Sundale School, or if you live in Tulare and you want to go to Liberty, and the two schools don't agree, like one school won't let them go or the other won't accept them, and they go through their local boards and they turn them down, and the parents are still upset, then they come to the County Board of Education and they can review the law, make sure it was done properly, and if they see justification, they can overturn that. So there are some of those. The other thing the county board does, which is also elected, they don't do a lot like a school board in a district, but the County Board of Education also reviews, I mentioned, charter approvals. If a district turns down a charter, they can come to the county board for possible approval. The other thing that the County Board of Education does is if a student is expelled from a school district, which is the school board expels them because they've committed some serious offense, and they think it was not done legally, they didn't have their due process, they can appeal to the county board, and the county board reviews all of the case. They listen to the transcript of the original expulsion hearing, and they look at the letters and the notifications, and they listen to the parent and the school district, and they decide if everyone followed the law. Every now and then you have a school district that once in a while, it's happened 2 or 3 times, I think, in the last 10 years maybe at the most, Every now and then, a school district forgot to send a legal notice and technicality of some sort, and they'll bounce the kid back to school. So those are the main things the county office does. School districts really are pretty sovereign. They have the right, you have the right in a community to vote on your school board members and pretty much then develop your program according to that thick ed code. And when I say that, in our state in particular, we don't have a lot of flexibility because there's so many regulations on what we have to do. So it is cumbersome sometimes, and I know you all know that my solution is that if we only have legislators go to Sacramento for 3 months every other year, I think we'd be fine. Because then they won't have time to worry about schools that much, except maybe pass a budget. That's all I need is. But I'm probably preaching to the choir on that one. So that's really the school district, county office of ed, and superintendent kind of thing. When I come back, there are several topics I would like to address. I'm looking at the time, and I've got 5 to 15 more minutes. So several topics I would like to address. One is that, we are at a time in education which is, I think, pretty exciting, but it's sort of on one hand, very exciting time to be in education, or to be alive, honestly. I'm thankful I'm alive every day. And then on the other hand, it is a pretty frightening time in education and to be alive. So we constantly live with these two almost contradictory feelings about things. Some of our teachers that have been in education as long as I am say, I wish it were like the old days. What I always tell them is you forgot what it was like in the old days. It really wasn't that good. It really wasn't. But in reality, in the old days, because I know what they're going back to, because I started in 1978 in education. So I know what the late 70s, the 80s, the early 90s looked like. In education, the public still pretty much trusted your local school. Teachers were still kind of respected.
That's before unified schools.
Yeah, kind of respected, and they pretty much left us alone to do what was important in school. And then the issue really came about was that in the late 90s, the accountability system started, where we started testing kids. No Child Left Behind from the federal government, which was really the federal takeover. That's my own opinion, sorry. Anything I say is not Mr. Vidak's opinion, by the way, it's mine. So don't go tell him I said these things and said it was his. So this is my own opinion. But in 2002 is when, No Child Left Behind was implemented, and that was kind of that federal hammer down on accountability and really changed what we did in school a great deal. Now I've just said, that sounds pretty negative, doesn't it? Okay, now I'm going to go over here and say, I believe that was one of the best things that happened in education also. It was like going to the dentist. It was that root canal that you didn't want to have, and you're glad it's over and you never want to have it again. But then once you're on the other side of that, you realize what was wrong with that, and you can do a better job as a result of it. And here's what I mean by that. In 1995, before No Child Left Behind, if you were in Pixley and you were in 4th grade, you had no idea if you were getting anywhere near the same education as if you were in Palo Alto or Visalia. No idea. Everyone was blindly going on, doing whatever they wanted to do. Now, No Child Left Behind went to an extreme, and I think they overdid it and tested the wrong things and was really heavy-handed. But ever since then, even now, we have a sense of, not in minute detail, but we have a sense of how a student in Pixley or Visalia or Palo Alto, whether or not the education they're getting is anywhere the same. Now, I don't mean that in minute detail, because there's so many differences, and you can't expect everything to be the same, and I don't want everything to be the same. Kids aren't the same in Palo Alto. There are challenges that are there with language, with parents, with poverty. There are just different challenges everywhere, and so you cannot be the same. But I think that we've gone through this horrible time of testing and came out the other side, and now we're trying to be more reasonable on testing. That's what I keep hoping. But we still have a comparable set of information on what are the schools really doing. So I think with that comparable set of information, I'm going to go back to the ed code. If we could do away with half of the ed code and just look at that comparable set of information and let local people decide if they like it or not, then we can make the decision. If we're in Pixley or Tulare and we say, I want every kid to be as highly educated as they are in Palo Alto, well, then it's up to you to vote and do that. You can compare and know if you are. In 1995, you had no idea. You were blindly thinking everything's wonderful, and there were different levels of education going on. Now at least we know. So that's the good side. You know. The bad side is it's painful to know sometimes, and then we get forced into doing things that aren't decided at the local level. That was the No Child Left Behind issue, and that's still the issue. So in the end of November, I'm going to give you the teaser for next. The end of November, for the first time since, I think, let's see, we're in, 2017. So I think it's been 2013 was the last time we had some kind of a score, like API score to rate schools. I think it was 2013. So for 4 years, we've been on this rebuilding and changing our testing system and changing the standards and all those kinds of things. Well, next month, at the end of the month, there's the first real release of the dashboard. There was one in the spring, but it was a pilot. But the first real release of what they're calling a California dashboard, schools dashboard. And I think a dashboard is a pretty good symbolism for what it looks like, because if you think of your car dashboard with lots of lights and gauges on it, it doesn't just give you one number that says you're going 60 miles an hour. It tells you if you're, is your gas mileage as you push the gas, is it going up, down? Is it how many miles left do you have? If it's going to overheat, you get a light. So you get a lot of indicators on your dashboard. So the new dashboard is going to have lots of indicators. It will not have one score for a school or one score for a district. It will have an indicator for things like, and I don't have the list completely in my head, but it will compare what they call chronic absenteeism. How many kids are missing many days of school a year? It will tell you how do you compare with how many kids you suspend or expel from school with other school districts. It'll tell you how you're doing as far as what they defined as college and career ready, which means, and that's a complicated one, but they look at grades, career, technical, vocational completions, whether you're A through G required for college. So it gives you a rating on that. It also gives you all your typical scores, like how your kids are doing in math and how they're doing in language arts. In No Child Left Behind, that's all we got, those two basically. So you have academics, you have discipline kinds of things, you have attendance, you have whether you're being college and career ready, and you have, graduation rates. In your school district, what's your graduation rate? Is it good? Is it going up? Is it going down? And the other indicator that it will do is most of these, and it's taken a couple more years, but it will tell you, one is, are you at a level that the state has determined is good? If you are, you'll have a green light. If you're really good, you'll have a blue light. If you're not quite as good, you'll have a yellow, orange, or red light. That's why it's a dashboard, I think. So you'll have these indicators, a lot of them, not only for those things I mentioned, but for every student group. So you can look and say, students that are in poverty, how do they graduate? How did they do on math? Are they absent all the time? You can look at ethnic groups, if there are enough of them. White versus African American versus Hispanic. You know, is there a difference there? You'll be able to see in this dashboard all of those kinds of indicators. Now, as an educator, that's important information to work internally so the school board and community can set goals for what you're going to do locally. That's my belief. What is hard is a lot of the public, realtors especially, like just one number, so they can say, this is an excellent school over here. You're still going to be able to do that with lights, or colors. If it's all blue or all green, you're going to say that is a solid school. And if it's all red, you're going to say that's a horrible school. So it'll still be pretty easy, but it's going to be, you're going to have, I don't know how many different things, probably 50 different things you'll look at. But they'll be the big ones across. So that's going to come out at the end of November. And what I could do you have internet connection and everything here? What I could do is actually give you a demo of that, kind of show you what it looks like in real life. Or I can answer just questions on, some of the questions I know that you do have and topics I would like to address are any topics all the way from, where are we with Common Core standards and what does that really mean now? Because there's always controversy over that. What are the standards we're teaching and why are we teaching them? Or are they going to change? Are they coming back? Or are they going? I can address that. I can also address some really tough topics. I don't mind doing that. Gender bathrooms. I can tell you where we are with that on the law. I won't tell you what I believe. I can just tell you what we're supposed to be doing. And then there were some more recent strengthening of requirements for basically for simpler terms, sex education. And I can review that. I'm not really up on that, but I know that they've strengthened that a little bit. So that's a tougher one. There's still some local, they're making it harder and harder for local school boards to not do some of those things. And that's, that's one of the struggles between Sacramento and your local community all the time. That's why I would like to honestly reset the ed code and let us have more flexibility within some, I know there are going to be some big parameters, of course, but there's so many things, everything from water testing to sex education to all gender bathrooms, kind of thing.
Could you hit on the Common Core? Where are we on there?
Yeah,
Please?
I can, in 3 minutes, I'll tell you where we are.
Okay.
Common Core, first of all, is, in California, we have our own standards. They are based on what was agreed upon by many states as the Common Core standards. But there's no requirement to stick with a set of standards outside of what our state has decided on. It's the standards, and when you really look at them, most of the implementation, I believe, of the Common Core standards, which is what they are really here to stay. That's my opinion. I don't know, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I believe that they're here to stay. And the reason I'm saying that is that I don't agree with everything in the standards because there's so much. In fact, there's too much to do in 12 grades in school or 13 grades in school. Sometimes you look at standards and kids would need to stay until they're 23 years old before you actually teach all that stuff. So there's too many standards is the big thing. But most of our standards today are based on some basic concepts. And this pretty defines Common Core. And I'm going to say that for my grandchildren, this is what I want them to learn, by the way. So I'm not saying Common Core, but these are the things I want them to learn. They're less based on memorizing facts. And the design is to try to get kids from an early age on to solve problems and think more critically in unusual ways, to be creative. And to do that with other people in a group collaboratively. Sometimes rather than Common Core, industry, when they talk about working for Google or any of the tech corporations or any big corporation or any business, they'll talk about what's important, and they'll say, we want kids that can communicate well, which means the basics, reading and writing. I mean, you got to read and write. That's still there. You need to know advanced math, not just computations, but understand way more math than I do to be really successful as we go forward. That's that creative, problem-solving level math, deep understanding. You need to collaborate and be creative. They call it really the 4 C's. That's when I talk to people, I go, I don't want to call it the Common Core, but that's what I want my grandchildren to be able to do, because the world that my granddaughter is going to be in when she graduates in 2028, and I think probably will go off to training or college or something, and then go out and get a job in 2032, 2033, what are they going to need? The facts they memorize, that she memorizes today in second grade, I lose track, in second grade, are really important, but it's not the facts, because we have more facts on our phone than you ever can memorize anyway. And it's not that you don't memorize facts, but you need to realize that the purpose of education isn't to put everything in your head, but it's to process. And to be able to know a new situation and work with people and solve problems and get the facts when you need them. So I want her to be able to do that, because her world is going to be different than our world. So partly this is my own opinion, the Common Core got all bogged down in politics. There were some good reasons for what we were doing in education, but there were some bad ways it got implemented and put together. And so part of it is bad, and I'm glad the federal government is pretty much out of it now, because we're not dictated yet as much as we were with No Child Left Behind. I mean, there's still too much. But the Common Core is not dictated by our state standards are still dictated by Sacramento. That's where the issue is Sacramento now, not the federal government in education. So that's kind of my opinion on where we are with standards, and I can answer more questions and go into more detail next time. I push my limit to be...
Can I ask a really quick question?
Sure.
A little red flag went up for me when you were talking about your dashboard, and you said, and then with ethnic, whatever color that was, but you said, and if there's enough of them.
Enough because...
That has a red flag for me. What do you mean, enough of them?
Yeah, what I meant by that is that there's actually, in statistics, an N, or size of number of, to be a statistically significant group. So if you're a school of 600 and you have 3 African Americans, they're not enough to be significant to give you a number, a color. So you have to have, in a school, you have to have at least 30, I believe, in a group. I think it's 30 or 15 or 30. They keep changing it, so I don't remember which they landed on. 15 students in a school and 30 in a district, I think. I could have that a little wrong. But that's what I meant by enough. Enough to be significant that they put it on the dashboard. Because otherwise you would have like every group ever, and you have 1 student maybe. So
How does that school with only 19 come in on anything?
their dashboard doesn't work very well. The dashboard does not work well for a school of 20 or even 100, because every year it's just not statistically good. Most of the accountability system is designed by the principles of statistics, and you need enough numbers to make it at all relevant. And so small schools have a real tough time. A lot of the rules, if you're below 250 students, you're exempt from. or you have a modification of. So some of the things I say don't really apply to schools less than 250. There are some
Will there be a
exceptions.
budget number in that dashboard, Craig?
Is there a budget? The dashboard is really about achievement and climate.
Okay.
There is other data you can go on. It's not going to be housed in that dashboard, but there is a State Department you can look at global budget numbers for any school or district. That's all online. I hate to run, but I got to.
If I drove 2.5 hours, can I throw out one question?
Okay, one question.
Because I caught the tail end of your bit.
Yeah.
And when you talk about NCLB was bad, but ESSA is better, I'm going to disagree 100 ways from Tuesday.
Yeah.
And the Federal Common Core is exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
The Assembly bill passed out of this Sacramento Assembly was Common Core plus the 15% they added on. The 15% they added on was higher level math.
Right.
They've still moved 8th grade algebra to 9th grade legislatively. And the idea that they're not memorizing is not true, because if you take a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grader and put material in front of them, by nature they memorize.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they're memorizing not necessarily the math facts, they're memorizing 3 ways to do the problem, writing the mini math essay, and drawing the caveman math picture. And I come to this from a whole different lot of perspectives. One is a dad, one is a school board member, and one is a NASA engineer,
Oh, good. Which school board?
but Estill City Schools.
All right, great.
But I just think it's difficult to put that argument out there,
Uh-huh.
because when you look at the facts of what California's implemented, it is 100% Common Core.
Do you still have Pam Abel?
Yes, I do.
Good. Okay.
And she's probably happy I'm down here versus our backyard for right now, because
Yeah.
I stick out because the talking points don't match up with the facts on the ground.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't have time to address all of your, but I am going to come
Am I
back.
making sense if nothing else?
Well, you are, and I believe, and what I said before, or maybe as you were coming in, is that one problem is the whole politicized part of it that really isn't what goes on in the classroom. The purpose behind it, the federal government's influence, I think the federal government's influence is less now than No Child Left Behind. Certainly, it's not nearly as intrusive. It's more guidelines. The state did wholesale accept it, though, and pass it, so you're right. It is the Common Core standards with some additional changes. But what I was trying to make a point as, for my children, and preparing them for 2030, 2035, because my grandchildren, because they're in 2nd grade and 5th grade, and I think that a lot of that processing, they do memorize, but it's not memorization as the central thing. You have to always memorize. How do you learn to read if you don't memorize? How do you learn some math if you don't memorize? Of course you memorize. But the main purpose is processing and understanding the concepts. You said the 3 ways to do a problem. And frankly, it's a lot harder for kids now. All that is, as a parent, I'm worried about what we're expecting. As teachers, I'm worried about what we're trying to get them to do. It may not be doable. This may be a grand experiment that flops because we're trying to do too much in too short a time with every student. And that's a debate still out there to be had. And still, parents, school board members disagree on whether this is the right thing to teach or not. And that'll go on for a long time.
3 years I can predict the scores. I can look at the scores and I can predict what SBAC will do. I've been doing it since 2014. I draw 2 lines in the sand. Economically disadvantaged? Not. I'm never off by more than 2 percentage points. If you're economically disadvantaged, you are under the gun and you do not stand a chance, because you need outside resources to supplement if you are 100% locked and loaded and aligned to SBAC, which is what the test is teaching.
I agree that if you're in poverty or have other language challenges, you need a lot more extra to get to the same level, and that's a grand experiment on what can we do that, and that's the challenge we have. I gotta run though. Hey,
No, I don't
back.
like that where kids are experimenting on, but okay, we'll get you back in.
You put me back in, we'll work on a time, November, December, January, whenever you can, and I can get my calendar.
Yes.
And I'll do it at a time where my other meeting is
I can be much later too.
Okay.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate
you.
all of you, it was great.